Past life regression. My first experience with a past life regression was many years ago. I was living in New York, and a friend of mine who was a spiritualist had heard about this woman who was this supposedly this incredible therapist. And she did time in New York and in London, England. And so it was her time in New York, and my friend was able to get an appointment and wanted me to take it. And I was like, okay, whatever, sure. I'm open to try anything. Pretty much, I'm open to try anything, regardless of what my inner voice says, because there was then a critic back in there that had this noisy little voice sometimes of doubt, and this is not possible. But I did it. I went to the appointment, and a lovely older English woman, great apartment, Central Park West, looking at the park. Went in, had just a quick hello. She sat me in this really big, comfortable chair, kind of like a designer-esque lazy boy, actually, if you will, and had a small chat about important relationships to me this lifetime. And at the time, I was really curious about my relationship with my twin sister and why we came in together. Obviously, my son, huge relationship this lifetime, and an ex business partner at the time who was, to say the least, a handful. So we had that small chat, and so she was going to direct the therapy to understand my relationship and what I was working out with these souls that I had mentioned. And so she did this before the hypnosis. She did this energy check. Just wanted to make sure my energy was cool. And I was like, what if my energy's not cool? So she tested it with this thing that kind of moves, and she was like very pleased with the results. She's like, okay, you have good energy. You can do this. You're ready for it. So all the while, the little voice in the back of my head was like, no way. You can't hypnotize me. This is just not possible. And this is silly. Like, this is just a fun experience. Like, whatever. It'll be something fun to talk about with my friend over a glass of wine when it's finished. And so I was like, okay, whatever you want me to do. So she's okay, we're gonna count, which is something you would expect. Okay, we're gonna count to 10, and you're gonna walk down this road, and you're gonna see a doorway at the end. And I was just kind of saying, oh my God, this is so cliche and absolutely impossible, right? Within 5 minutes, I swear to you, I was out, like literally under. And when you enter a regression, it's so surreal because it's very vivid, very lucid, but there's a little bit of distance between like your space and the regression or the past life that you're visiting. And I was under immediately before I got down to the door at the end of the road. And so I found myself along this road, and this beautiful little blonde girl runs past me, and she's laughing. And the visual was like the French countryside, mini chateau, beautiful spring day. And this girl just is running, and I fully lose it in this regression. I'm like, just start bawling. And I'm like, oh my God, why am I bawling? And so she brings me, the therapist is like, okay, let's go deeper into it. And her voice just feels also kind of far away, but she's like a guide. And so she's like, let's go back. Who is this little girl? And she brings me back into this kitchen space, but it's not a traditional kitchen because it's hundreds of years ago. But there was like this kind of ceramic style sink, but with water, from a pitcher. And I'm looking out of this window, and I just see this beautiful countryside and this horse and buggy and dirt road. And so I'm looking out of the window, and I turn around, and there's this woman standing in front of me who's pregnant. And I was like, whoa, holy shit, this I'm her husband in this lifetime. And so we go back further, and it turns out that I was a man, a lawyer-esque person, very traditional, scholarly. And I was married to this beautiful woman who actually, this lifetime's soul is my son. It's crazy to get your head around this. So that's then where the regression shifted, and she brought me into, okay, let's go to the point where you leave this experience and you cross over from this lifetime. And I was getting into that horse and buggy that I had seen, and I took one step and somebody shot me in the back, and I fell backwards and left my body. And it was the most beautiful experience, losing my body, like just leaving my body. The ease, I don't think there's a word I could put to it other than ease and relief in leaving the body. And things kind of went blue, and like just this beautiful blue. And I entered the other side. It took a while. And so it turns out that the person who shot me was my drunk neighbor, who this lifetime is my twin sister, which is completely nuts. But we explored the afterlife from that lifetime, and I stayed on that road, which is where I was really emotional during the beginning of the regression. Stayed on that road until that baby left. And that's when I actually officially left to really cross over to the other side from that particular regression. And then she brought me into the lifetime with my ex-business partner, who in that lifetime I was a journalist and had my own newspaper and a printing press. And it was a lot of work, but I was really passionate about it. And my ex-business partner in that lifetime was my controlling mother. And in that lifetime, I died in a chair alone. I mean, not such a fun lifetime. But coming out of that session, which felt like it lasted really seriously like 5 minutes, she woke me up 4 hours later. I was under exploring these lifetimes, and it was remarkable. Life-changing. Talk about just annihilation of skeptic or doubt. Like, no way. I spilled out of that apartment onto kind of a sunset in Central Park with a horse and buggy going by, and it just deep breaths and a walk through the park, and eventually ended up at a little cafe having a glass of wine with my friend, going on and on about how actually amazing it was. So that was the first time I realized the value of understanding what you come into this lifetime with. That is just the first one. But after that regression, I ended up in North Carolina, right outside of Asheville. My dad had this little cabin, mountainside, little creek, really amazing. And I'd love to go visit them when I was on the road. Okay, let me backstory this so you guys can understand why I traveled so much. So I was a touring photographer in music and also a creative in the film industry. So my career has been spent seriously, in filmmaking, movies, and photographing tours on the road in music. And so it put me in situations where I traveled a lot with very interesting people and exposed to situations, and sometimes not so interesting, but exposed to it all. Okay, so that's kind of a quick little backstory. But okay, so I'm in North Carolina visiting my dad while I was on that side of the country on tour. And he handed me this book called Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian Weiss. And he's like, Valarie, I really need you to read this book as soon as you can, because I need somebody to talk to about it. And I was like, okay, I'll read it. I'm jet lagging. I'll be up late. So anyway, I start reading the book. totally sucked me in, read it overnight, didn't get any sleep, and jumped into a cup of coffee and a conversation with my dad. And he's like, "What did you think?" And I was like, it's funny. I just experienced this crazy past life regression in New York. And I really, really have just recently been opened up to this idea of the healing powers of past life regression. And in this book, also, the patient, which I don't want to give it away, she channels these beings from the other side that really speak to how much we are destroying our planet, and how we're losing our humanity in a lot of ways. And my dad, in that conversation, looked at me, and he's like, "Valarie, if we don't get it together on planet Earth, we're going to lose everything that's beautiful." And I just looked at him, and it hit my heart so deeply, because I was like, wow, we're giving these signs and these messages from the other side to pay attention. And so often we miss that beat. But the continuation of Many Lives, Many Masters. So I was on the road again and ended up in Hawaii. And I found myself in Honolulu at this beautiful house overlooking Waikiki Beach. And the house was owned by this older woman, elegant, graceful woman from Japan. And she was hosting this party and knew part of our group. And so we ended up there, and I'm looking at the fireworks and just kind of getting lost in the stunning experience that I was in the middle of, and ended up wandering away from the crowd just to take it in a little bit more and kind of have an alone moment. Ended up in the kitchen, which is where I ended up finding this woman, our host, this Japanese princess. And so we sit at this beautiful table with these little silver spoons and caviar, go figure, it was crazy. And she tells me her story about being raised in Japan and as a princess, and the luxuries that afforded her. And eventually she went to Hawaii for a school experience and met this man, this builder, this young man, and they fell madly in love. And she walked away from everything and built a life with him in Hawaii. And so she's talking to me at the table, and then tells me that she lost her husband about 2 years ago, and their special thing was decorating for the holidays, and that she hadn't taken down her Christmas decorations in 2 years because that's how she honors her husband. And she was grieving. She's grieving the loss of this beautiful man. And then she's quiet. She takes a pause very gracefully, and she looks at me and she goes, "Valarie, have you ever read Many Lives, Many Masters?" I kid you not. She said that to me, and I just smiled and went, "Oh my God," and told her my story with my dad. And so we got into it, talking about past lives, life after death, everything. What an incredible night. Cut to, I'm in Martha's Vineyard with Carly Simon. Another crazy, amazing experience that I found myself in and was so grateful for. But Carly made pasta, and we talked about life and experiences, aging, the gamut. And so we get into it, and I'm like, "Carly, let me read your tarot cards," because I love reading tarot and all kinds of cards. And so I end up reading her cards. And so we get into it, and the experience was just perfect. And so we start talking after the reading, and she looked at me and she goes, "Valarie, have you ever read Many Lives, Many Masters?" I swear to you. And again, I smiled, and we got into it and went in deep into this incredible conversation about past lives, and regression therapy, et cetera. And she had revealed to me, if she wasn't afraid of flying, she was like, would go to Miami, which is now where Brian Weiss practices, and try to have a session with him for her past lives and her healing and therapy. So what an incredible journey into the concept of past lives. So I decide, all right, I'm going to do another regression. And this regression, I am going to really address the point of this lifetime, the healing that I need to experience, and the issues that I keep hitting and not being able to get past. So I go under very easily, and immediately I'm on this battlefield. In fact, this regression I call the battlefield, but I'm on this battlefield and I am in like layered with skins. It's cold. It's like dark gray. There's a little bit of fire, like light way off in the distance, and everyone around me is dead. And blood everywhere, and it's freezing, and I am screaming at the top of my lungs, just no, no. And I look at my arms, and I have like pale skin and red curly hair, and I'm a younger woman screaming, and I lost everybody. And in the regression, this older man who's like has furry skins on and this gray beard comes up behind me, and he puts his hand on my shoulder, and I look at him and feel rage, like just rage at this human. And then the therapist brings me even deeper into that life prior to the battlefield experience. And so it turns out that that man is my father in this lifetime, and the leader. It wasn't king yet, but leader. It was so many hundreds of years ago, this lifetime. And his wife, my mother, died, and they shared only me, their daughter, and he never had sons. And he adored me, actually, but I had no credibility. My intellect was not considered, and my wisdom wasn't considered because I was a woman. And our village, we were on the facing war, this battle, and I had ways to save our people, and I shared those ways with the powers to be, and they were completely disregarded because I was a woman. And so my father took some of my ideas, but not all of my ideas, and activated only a part of them, and everyone died. Like everyone died. My lover, everybody died except for my father. And in that battlefield, what I ended up leaving that lifetime with was the inability to trust, and to trust my voice, which has been playing out this lifetime. Because like I never trusted my voice up until, recently. Honestly, I'd always get it to a certain point, or get a project or a film or whatever I was doing to a certain point, and I just hit a wall because I didn't trust my voice. Because God forbid, if I'm successful with my voice, how many people will die? I know that sounds crazy, but bringing that information into this lifetime was so validating and so healing and so deep. And from that moment on, it's been like that vision, that lifetime is with me now. And I'm really able to push things through and really face things, and not have that deeper unknown sense of fear that my voice will hurt someone, or in that battlefield scene, everyone. So past life regression therapy, wow, just wow. It is deep, and it is valuable, and it is important. In fact, so this is kind of a cool story. My son, Z, who is now on the other side, when he was 8, he was standing in front of our bookcase, and he looked up at me, and he's like, "Mama, because we're looking at the books. He's like, Mama, which one of these books can teach me about love? And I looked at this beautiful, awesome, wide-eyed young man, and I was like, whoa, just internally, wow, that's quite the question for an 8-year-old. And I had this knowingness, this silent knowingness in that moment that he came in looking for answers. He came in hurting and wanting to know. And so I kind of just grabbed Dante's story about Beatrice and his passion and love for Beatrice. They met when they were really young, and ultimately Beatrice ended up crossing over at a young age. And eventually, Dante ended up writing the Divine Comedy, and Beatrice ended up being a guide of his from purgatory towards paradise or heaven. And so anyway, I hand Z this book, which now that I think about it, I go, whoa, that was probably a pretty heavy story to hand off to an 8-year-old. But he was so tapped in and so advanced in his life experience. And so intuitively, I handed him that story. And so eventually Z ended up having his own past life regression. And so it turns out he lost the love of his life because his father, the king, had her killed because she was a peasant, and in the king's eyes, not good enough for his prince son. And in that lifetime, so it turns out that I was the complacent queen, and the king was his father this lifetime. Man, get your head around that, right? So, the Divine Comedy. An exploration from Dante's grieving perspective of what happens when a soul leaves and crosses over to the other side, and how Beatrice, the love of his life, was a guide for him, and how that plays out now, like in my perspective and with Z, is perhaps Z will be my guide into paradise. Now that would be really cool. Yep.